Rob Rotman for Adapt Chicago Productions. We're about to start our 21st year.
That's great, Rob.
Thank you. And I can't think of two people to have on more than Thomas Wilson and Susan Aarup. Today we're going to talk about the Illinois SinglePayer Coalition. Susan, give us a brief summary of what this is.
This is it's an expansion law that would do away, and it increases Medicare. So Medicare, it's called Medicare for All.
Right.
Often it's called Improved Medicare for All. And it's a nationwide bill that guarantees the right to health care for everyone from birth to death.
Right.
And there would be no more co-pays, no insurance companies. Everyone would have guaranteed health care. Your health care wouldn't be tied to your employment anymore. That's what happened to me when I lost my job. I lost the health care.
Right.
Well, with Illinois SinglePayer and the national SinglePayer, we would not have to worry. Everyone would be insured.
Right. And Tom, follow up on that. I mean,
Yeah. You know, almost every state has a single-payer group or a coalition. And in Illinois, the Illinois SinglePayer Coalition is the most prominent group, although we have the National Nurses Union, which represents a lot of nurses in Illinois. They're a strong single-payer supporter. And there's also the Physicians for a National Health Plan, who represent the doctors that support universal health care. As Susan was saying, single payer is universal health care. It means everybody in, nobody out, and it would guarantee everything that was medically necessary, and it would be no payments at the point of service. So it'd be paid for through like a progressive tax or a tax on financial transactions or something that was fair and equitable. And the other thing it does is our current system has so many flaws in it. It has over 30 million that are uninsured. That's a travesty because the rest of the world doesn't leave its people without insurance. And then it has very unequal care. If you're an executive in a corporation, you get wonderful health care, right? But if you work in a factory or in some low-wage job, you either don't have health care or you have a really crummy health care that doesn't cover very much. And then, you know, there's all these gradients. And then we also have Medicare and Medicaid. Well, Medicare would be okay, except for now you have 80% paid by the government and 20% by the person getting Medicare. Now you can buy a supplemental insurance policy, but that's where Medicare goes wrong because those insurance companies don't like to pay. The single payer system is simpler. Everybody gets high quality health care, and it means that we all get equal health care so that some people aren't privileged over others in health care.
You wouldn't, right now in the U.S., bankruptcy over health care costs is one of the leading causes of bankruptcy.
what does the Disability Committee do? And, you know, what is their purpose, Susan, and then Tom?
I'm co-chair. We bring disability issues to and how it relates to Illinois SinglePayer and because there's a lot of similarities. And then we also have a long-term care committee, which is part of the, we call it the long-term care for services and supports.
Right.
And that wasn't covered under the original Bernie Sanders bill. And we do a lot of education, and awareness about disability issues, and it's educating, and even it's educating Illinois and the SinglePayer Coalition, and I'm on the board so that people with disabilities voices can be heard, because I have learned through the years that there is nothing about us without us, and the only way that that's going to happen is if we're at the table. That's why Chicago Adapt was formed in 1983 to end ableism, and so Adapt Productions is a part of that, and the whole idea of advocacy in healthcare so that we can be present, and it's becoming better.
Yeah. Tom, how did you become involved?
I became involved actually in the early 90s. And some people might remember during the Clinton administration, they were going to try to do healthcare reform. Well, they failed. And the idea is that at that time we tried to adopt a single payer system. But the corporations, the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, they make enormous profits off of healthcare in this country. And so we have a very strong enemy. The polls show that like 75–80% of the American public want single payer or Medicare for all. And that kind of support, you would think, well, sure, why wouldn't they pass the bill? But unfortunately, money in Congress talks a lot, and we've had a really hard time. We keep introducing the bill. Right now in the House, I think it has 130 co-sponsors. In the Senate, it's something like between 13 and 16 senators, which means that we still have a ways to go. But the momentum for single payer is growing. And in the disability community, people with disabilities have a lot to gain by supporting a Medicare for all bill. As we know, some doctors don't like to take Medicaid. Because the Medicaid pays so little, the healthcare system treats people as third-class citizens oftentimes. And in a Medicare for all system, the doctors would be decently paid for what they do for services for people with disabilities. And then, as Susan was mentioning, we pushed really hard in the Disability Committee and the long-term care work group that works in that committee to introduce long-term care as part of the Medicare for all, because the original bills never included it. And long-term care is part of health care. We know that people with disabilities often need assistance in their homes, and this service is very haphazard. Right now, it's easier to get into a nursing home than to get the home care that you need. And some states just don't provide very good long-term care.
Susan, what was it like growing up in terms of with a disability, and how do you feel that if you had had this as a child, would it have helped you?
My family is very conservative.
Wow.
So they grew up thinking, oh, I don't have first. I don't want to fight for services for my daughter because her disability will disappear.
Wow.
So as I got older, I began teaching them that that wasn't going to happen.
Wow.
And there was a lot of like, well, don't make waves. Don't look that way.
Wow.
Don't wear that or whatever you. And as a young person growing up,
Right.
that was hard for me to form a positive identity at times. My parents are very supportive of me, but only under their terms. And I think and they also told me that I could do whatever I wanted. Well, when they said that, they didn't know that I wanted to move out at the age of 6.
Right. Both of you, I know you did a policy paper. What did that involve?
Yeah. I'll start on that a little bit, Susan. You know, the long-term care working group started meeting a little over 2 years ago. And we started doing some research on what we thought a national complete system of long-term care should look like. And we looked at the programs that different states have. We adopted the best features from all of those. And we wrote it in a form which could be easily turned into legislation, we thought. But we had to do a lot of research. We talked to a lot of people that use long-term care services. And with that, we came up with a proposal. And then we wanted to make sure that that paper got well circulated.
Right.
Do you want to talk about how we did that, Susan? I know you talked at the national conference about this.
Well, ours is the only group of people with disabilities who are working on single-payer legislation for long-term care. There's about 15 of us, roughly, and we meet monthly, and we went over the bill and over what plans were set up. And then there's the national conference in Minnesota for single payer, which Illinois was a participant in. And I spoke on the panel for long-term care with Henry Moss, who is a doctor out of, I believe, California. And this is an ongoing dialogue. We meet monthly. We meet the fourth Monday from 5:30 to 7:30.
Would you ask people to join us?
Yeah.
And you meet where?
Access Living.
Okay, right.
Which is 115 West
Right.
Chicago Avenue.
Yeah. And the more people who come to this, it'll make it a bigger bill, because we're doing an outreach campaign.
Right. We're also critiquing, because there's a House bill, which is 1384, introduced by Representative Jayapal from the state of Washington.
Okay.
And there's a Senate bill introduced by Bernie Sanders. That's Senate Bill 1129. And the two bills have different proposals for long-term care. And we would think that the House bill that Representative Jayapal introduced is closer to what our policy paper suggested. And we want to see the Sanders bill improved. So
And how can it improve?
well, one of the things is that he included home and community services, funding it in his proposal, but he didn't include nursing home care. And while we don't want to encourage nursing homes, you know, the reality is that you don't want people dying needlessly in really crummy nursing homes, and that they need to be funded at the national level and monitored for quality, and that if you have a system where both are included, it could be easier to keep people or help people move out of nursing homes into the community.
You know, I'm interested, you know, the all talk is socialized medicine. It's going to bankrupt the country. Is that true?
Good question.
And I know,
No.
do we need to replace Medicaid, and why? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what?
We
Medicare.
need to have Medicare improved, and also have Medicaid
Right.
so it's not tied to each state. Because right now, in order to be on Medicaid, and if you have a disability, you have to live in poverty. And
Who wants to do that? Right.
and so
Right.
you can only make
Right.
$2,000 a month as a general rule.
And if you're on SSI, you're getting like $761 a month, right? That's below the cost of living. It's below the poverty level.
Yeah.
And so with the single payer bill, long-term care would be a universal service of health care. So middle class can't afford health care now. We know many people go bankrupt when they go into a long-term care situation. Nursing homes can wipe out your savings in months, because it's like anywhere from like $5,000 to $8,000 you're giving over the nursing home for bad care.
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I know 40 years ago, Jimmy Carter was president, and you know, I was in Iowa. I worked for Ted Kennedy, and I will always remember when there was a doctor at the University of Iowa clinics, Gert McQueen, and she was a very strong Kennedy supporter. And then there was a nurse at the hospital who said, you know, well, his brothers were socialists. What do we expect? Is there a difference between what Ted Kennedy wanted for health care and what we have now? Or?
Well, Ted Kennedy's proposal would have been a single payer type proposal, and things have evolved since then. But what we have now is improved from where Ted Kennedy started us down the right road. And, you know, for-profit healthcare doesn't work. We need, like every other developed country in the world, we need a universal system with everybody in, and with it well-funded and everybody getting equal care.
Thank you. Susan, is there anything left you would like to say?
I would like to encourage everyone to come to our Illinois Single Payer Coalition meeting at Access Living, and it's at 115 West Chicago, the second Thursday of every month from 6:30 to 8, and also please come to our long-term care disability working group that meets the fourth Monday of every month from 5:30 to 7:30. We need you, and we would really welcome your input, because everyone has value, and health care is a human right.
I want to thank you both, Tom and Susan. And fight on.
Thank you.
Late
Thank
on.
you, Rob.